Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Scott, I think we left off with you were going to describe, excuse me, what borderline personality is.
Right. So just to briefly reiterate, again, it's not that you have a borderline intellectual functioning. It is how you interact with the world. And there's some different characteristics of this disorder compared to antisocial personality disorder. So let me give you the overarching definition. It's a pervasive pattern of instability, of interpersonal relationships, self-image, and affects. That's kind of how you react to things, and marked impulsivity, beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts, and you have to have 5 or more of 9 different symptoms. So I'll read them out to you, and then I'll tell you why I think he met certain ones of those, okay? The first one is frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. And so when you look at some of the Henderson Behavioral Health records and other notes, if Nikolas had a breakup with a girlfriend when he was about 16. And so this was very leaving, the separation was very upsetting to him. And so it was sort of this abandonment issue that came up. And watching Dr. Denny's interview, who's a neuropsychologist that evaluated him, he did talk about that sometimes he might just stay by himself because he didn't like being rejected. So these folks can be really super rejection sensitive, but once they're in a relationship, they kind of will cling on to it kind of in a panicky kind of way, and they may have that kind of fear of the person abandoning them. I thought he meant that one. The second one is a pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships characterized by alternating between extremes of idealization and devaluation. What does that mean? What that means is, at one point, I'm like, oh my God, I love you, you're the best thing. No one's like that, that's cool. But then something goes wrong, and then you flip 100% to you're terrible, you're evil, I can't stand you. Again, a girlfriend that he had, he broke up with her, and although he would say he idealized her or loved her, or she was the love of his life initially, if you read some of the comments he's told other examiners about her, some of the phrases, I won't mention them, but that is that kind of devaluation, and it's all good or bad. You split the person, and you end up loving them. We're all human, we all have faults, but there's no forgiveness for that. It can flip to a bad devaluation of the person. The third is identity disturbance. This is a markedly and persistent, unstable self-image and sense of self. So how does the person kind of view how they look, how they appear? Do they have sort of, what's my identity? These kind of thoughts. And he did search out questions to try to answer that when you go through some of his internet searches. So he would search out kind of questioning, who am I? Certain aspects of why do I feel this way? So that's noted in the records and in his internet searches as well. And he does have body conscious issues and images about his sense of self and how he might be perceived by others. So I thought he met that criteria. Impulsivity in at least 2 areas that are potentially self-damaging. And you can have a range of different criteria if you say, well, they're impulsive and it can hurt them. So drugs and alcohol would be an example under this category. So he did have use of marijuana and Xanax, at times alcohol, and he described to me in my interview that worsened certain of his symptoms and how he felt. So that would be an example. I've already given the example of when he was kind of very impulsive, hit the safe, broke his hand. That's an impulsive behavior that's self-damaging, and there can be some other examples for him as well. Number 5, recurrent suicidal behavior gestures, or threats, or some type of self-mutilating behavior. Now here, this is an interesting one in this category because a person can maybe superficially scratch themselves either on their arm, their leg is common, thigh is common, and it's not really for the intent to die. Some people will express to you it helps relieve the pain, or it may, I concentrate on that versus other things, but they aren't intending to kill themselves, but they'll make these statements or gestures. So there was, at one point, there was a threat assessment when he was about, it was in 2016 at Marjory, Stoneman, Douglas, and it got triggered because a peer at the school, he had commented either on Snapchat or some other social media that he might have cut himself or that he might have consumed gas, drank gasoline, this type of thing, when in reality, if you're drinking gasoline, that would cause serious medical problems. So, but there was some sort of gesture. He was evaluated by multiple folks, different agencies, and then he said, no, I really didn't do that. So it either can be for attention or it's a gesture, but it's not with the intent, typically to die. And affective instability, this means you have a marked change in mood. So you can have really intense dysphoria. It can be brief, usually last a few hours. So for example, when he would feel depressed or be upset about something, he would have these thoughts that he would want to go out and kill, usually animals, to help relieve that stress, that dysphoria. So these thoughts of killing would come to his mind as part of that instability. 7 is chronic feelings of emptiness. So this is chronically feeling lonely. He told, there was a Henderson behavioral health therapist, Jared Benefield, and he said, I kind of feel lonely. He's described that to other folks, just kind of feeling chronically empty. And then 8 is inappropriate, intense anger or difficulty controlling the anger. So you can have frequent temper, constant anger, recurrent physical fights. I've given you several examples of that, but if some of the other examples, if you read his Instagram post, I read the Instagram post, and I can just sum them up. And some of the things that he said to some of his peers and communicated the anger in the way that he did was extreme, inappropriate, intense anger. And I think he meets that criteria. The last one, which I do not think he met as far as how the manual suggests, is transient, what we call stress-related paranoid ideation or severe dissociative symptoms. What does dissociative symptom mean? It means that you lose touch with reality or your context of your environment in some way. So sometimes people think of multiple personality disorder, kind of in the movies and the lay press. That would be kind of a huge extreme example, but there was not evidence that he's dissociated, lost touch with the world around him, and so I did not think he met that criteria.
Okay, so why is borderline personality applicable in this case, Dr. Scott?
Well, it's applicable in this case for a couple reasons. One, he meets the criteria. 2, that combination with the antisocial personality disorder, if you're trying to understand, why did he do this? People can wonder, people just don't do this. Why did he do this on that day? And a lot of characteristics of that borderline, remember again, it's not like a psychotic disorder or a mood disorder, are intense anger. When you feel maybe that you've been not respected, you've not been treated well, and that antisocial then personality disorder fuels the fire also that, this is how we're going to take care of this. This is how I'm going to do business. And so I think those two go hand in hand. Okay.
And the third thing you mentioned is malingering. What is malingering?
Yeah, so malingering we've covered, kind of to paraphrase it a little bit, but it is the gross exaggeration or faking of physical or psychological symptoms for the purpose of a secondary gain, which is a reason. So it could be, to get out of trouble, to get out of the military, to get into the hospital if you want a place to stay. There can be a lot of reasons a person may malinger. In forensics, almost pretty much every case I can think about, certainly one like this, if you're a good forensic evaluator and you're going to make an opinion about whether someone's underlying disorder did or did not cause them to commit murders, you have to do an evaluation of malingering, particularly in, certainly a case like this. And it is a really significant part of forensic evaluation.
Okay, and is malingering actually defined in the DSM-5 TR?
It is. It is included in a section called Other Focus of Clinical Attention. So it's not a mental disorder. So just because someone may make up something or fake something, it doesn't mean they're mentally ill, but it is included in the manual, so it's not a mental disorder, so that we have a way to say, this person doesn't have a mental disorder, they're faking it. And so that's why it's in the manual.
Okay. And Dr. Scott, you evaluated the defendant, Nikolas Cruz, for 3 days in this case, correct?
Yes.
At any time, did you feel that he was trying to manipulate you?
Well, certainly there were times during the evaluation where on the clinical part of the interview, I felt he was reporting kind of extreme mental health symptoms that were highly atypical, extreme physical symptoms that were highly atypical and not supported by the records. So if someone says, I've done X, Y, and Z, and I'm doing this, since I was a kid, and you have all the records and none of that happened, that's an example of malingering or manipulation in some way. Yes, so I did think so.
Okay, and did you find any evidence of malingering?
Yes, there was robust evidence that he was malingering during my examination, but also during Dr. Denny's examination.
Okay. What is the significance of the Yale, like Yale University, Brown, like Brown University, obsessive compulsive score?
Right. So I had gone through the mental health records, and one of the diagnoses, at least recorded in the record, he had been recorded with a diagnosis called attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, kind of summed up as ADHD. But one record also noted that he might have something called OCD, which stands for obsessive compulsive disorder. So if you've ever watched the show Hoarders, that would be an example kind of huge collection that's kind of under that category. These people may have real difficulties with a range of things. So they have to count every crack. They have to do the light switch 4 times or they can't leave. They have to, it's really kind of a thought that's intrusive. A behavior may be associated with it. So I thought, well, I see this is listed in the record. I never saw any of the true signs and symptoms of that. Where I think that came up is there were times he would ask his mother repeatedly to use the Xbox, kind of in obsessive way. But that's not the same thing. Can I play the Xbox? Can I play the Xbox? That doesn't mean you have a mental disorder in and of itself. So I gave him the structured interview. It's not like a psychological test that comes out with a score, but it lists a range of different possible obsessions and possible compulsions, like every possible one you can almost think of to make sure you're being thorough.
Okay. And what did that tell you?
He endorsed an extremely high number as present, when in reality, the records did not support that at all, not the ways he was describing.
And the significance of that?
That would be consistent with malingering, OCD, or that psychiatric symptom.
Okay. And how about, what's the significance of the trauma symptom inventory, too, that you
so the trauma symptom inventory, I administered it. Dr. Denny ultimately scored it, but I'm familiar with the instrument. I know the interpretation. This is an instrument that does have what we call validity scales. That's a term you're going to hear a lot about probably in the next couple days. So what a validity scale means and why it can be important in a test is the person presenting their symptoms in a truthful, valid manner or not? And so some tests don't have validity scales. You can't see if the report is valid or not. So if I opened up my DSM and I went around to the jury and asked you, do you have this symptom, this symptom, this symptom, and you answer every one yes, you're just answering yes, but I don't have a scale to see if you're answering it honestly or not. So validity scales and certain instruments help explain that to the evaluator, all right? So for the TSI-2, it stands for Trauma Symptom Inventory 2, he has to go through and answer a lot of symptoms that may be related if he had prior history of trauma. And so I administered it, and the scoring came out that he over-endorsed so many symptoms. Over-endorsed means he reported symptoms that are highly unusual to have that many by any one person, and so the scoring came out that it was atypical. So atypical reporting of symptoms, way too many, so it cast concern about him reporting kind of traumatic symptoms honestly. And so that would be another piece of evidence suggesting malingering or faking as well.
Okay, and how about the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, better known as the MMPI-3?
Yeah, so there's another self-report inventory. It helps measure kind of personality features and has many clinical scales on it. There's a third version out. I administered it. Dr. Denny, who is the neuropsychologist, did the final scoring, but I'm aware of the scoring and reviewed the scoring. This too has validity scales in it. This is why this instrument is very important in doing a forensic evaluation. And let me tell you a little bit about some of these validity scales in this. So they have scales. One's called the F scale, and it's looking at stands for the infrequency scale. How many kind of symptoms is a person reporting that are really kind of infrequent out there, right, in general? There's another scale called the FP scale, and that's looking at, are they reporting symptoms that even people in an inpatient unit, an inpatient psychiatry unit, would not endorse or would be extreme or highly unlikely? So now we're comparing him to the most severe psychiatric populations that have been tested in the country. You have to understand, I was in a room with him for 21 hours, so I can observe how does he present versus how does he answer on the testing. And although I'm a physician, we don't have a blood test for lying, but the MMPI is as pretty much close as you get. He scored extremely high on those validity scales, indicating that he was over-endorsing mental health symptoms, which really raised the question about the symptoms that he presented.
Okay, and how about the Personality Assessment Inventory, or the PAI?
Yeah, the PAI is similar in some ways to the MMPI in that it has validity scales. It's looking at people over-reporting or not. And Dr. Denny's interpretation of that was that it also was highly atypical and over-reporting.
And how about the Clinical Assessment of Attention, the CAT-A?
Yeah, so this one was interesting because one of the questions that has come up, and I thought a fair look needed to be done into it, was this issue of ability to concentrate, to attend. He was diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit disorder, from a young age. And he may or may not have some, lingering symptoms over time of that. So this is another self-report where they have given it to people with legitimate ADHD, confirmed, not in the midst of a legal case or trial where they'd have no reason to amp up their symptoms. So we know what a large, database looks like. And then you can compare his response. And again, his response was extremely high, highly unusual. Dr. Denny, I believe's interpretation of it was that it was consistent with malingering and exaggerated.
Okay. And did you have an opportunity to review the SIMS, which is the Structured Inventory of Malingered Symptomatology.
Symptomatology, it's a hard one. Anyway, so yes, so the SIMS is 75 true-false questions. And again, this one has 5 different subscales on it. And so it can be useful because rather than just looking, are they over-reporting a false belief or some other unusual symptom, we can now break it into different categories. So some of the scales on these are like amnesia, low intelligence, maybe a learning impairment, psychosis, or an affective, also known as a mood disorder. And so the cutoff score to suggest that they may be malingering, and you want to look at other testing to see if it coincides with that. And we have a lot of other testing looking at that. The cutoff score is greater than 14. He scored a 31, twice the cutoff score, extremely high. He also scored on every single subscale, including like the amnesia, which I have problems remembering, or I don't remember this and that. He also scored over the cutoff on that subscale as well.
Okay, and I think there was a clip with reference to the boot and the gun.
Yeah, so one of the things that you can malinger in different ways, and one human being can also malinger in different ways. So let me tell you kind of like the 2 main categories. So one category of malingering is presenting lots of terrible symptoms that you may have, all right? And so he did that on a lot of the testing. Another way of faking is kind of faking good. So it would be not taking responsibility and saying, oh no, that wasn't my problem. I didn't do that. So you're malingering well. You're trying to fake and present what we call a positive impression. You're trying to create, I love this term, it's called impression management. You're trying to manage the people around you by putting yourself in a positive light and manage them. So this clip, we're talking about a swastika that was placed and it was into evidence, it was related to the offense. There's a swastika on the boot. There's a swastika on one of the magazines. So I'm asking him about where did the swastika come from? What does it mean? Who put it on there? Now, I've read depositions of other individuals who they've testified they did not put the swastika on the gun or the boot. And then I'm going to ask him, how did this come from? You'll see what he acknowledges, but you'll also see how he, and you can judge, what answer does he give you when I say, what is the swastika, what did it mean to you? You know, you went into the school, it's on your gun, it's on your boot. On the day that you killed 17 people and shot 17 others, what was the purpose of the swastika? And I think the clip will speak for itself.
Yeah. Clip 4, please, Aaron.
And any time where someone might have thought you were carving like a swastika on a table or something like that?
My friends told me to do that, and they did it as well. And I did that for attention. And anything that I drew swastika or said nasty remarks about the race or gender equality or anything like that, it was all for attention.
Okay.
And that magazine, I'm sure you know about it. It was like I had a magazine with a swastika on it for my AR.
Yeah.
I didn't write that at all.
Where'd that come from?
Jameson Todd asked me if he wanted to draw a swastika on it. And so I said, sure.
Okay, so I
didn't think any of it.
So he drew the swastika on the magazine?
Yeah. We were just chilling out. He said, it's cool if I draw a swastika on your mag. I said, sure.
Okay. And was that magazine used on the day of the offense?
Yeah.
Okay. Was it left there like at the scene?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
And then someone told me I had a swastika on my boot. I did do that, but that was for attention.
Okay. When did you put the swastika on the boot?
Probably half a month before.
Okay.
And what kind of attention can you get from having a swastika on you?
Negative or positive. It can be either way because the swastika was used in Native American as a peace symbol.
Uh-huh.
And then when the Germans saw, I guess they took it up themselves and they made it into a symbolic symbol, which was really stupid because it was a Native American peace symbol.
Okay. But when you would put on your shoe for attention, which of those two was it most likely to kind of connect to or represent?
Mostly peace.
Okay.
All right, so his presentation, why, and there's a history of him with a swastika on the book bag, with a FN word. There's searches prior to this crime on the internet related to a range of things related to swastika. And in the course of my interview, although the swastika was on the magazine and the boot at the time, he killed 17 people. He said it was there for the intent of peace. And so sometimes that just doesn't sort of seem, in my opinion, consistent with what the record showed.
Okay. And did you make any other observations during your evaluation, Dr. Scott, that